it's good to recognize that these challenges exist and that it's great to try to support the person coming from a different country with food and music from their culture, incorporating any traditions and like really respecting their culture. Also realizing that it's still not the same and they're still going to miss things.
Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's podcast episode, I am going to re-welcome Sierra. Sierra has been one of my first guests, actually. Nacho and I interviewed Sierra and Tewabe 4 years ago already. I can't believe it. I actually had to double check myself. And that was just a reminder for myself that, we're doing this podcast since 4 years already. And it's just crazy to see how fast time is passing by. Back then, we recorded at my parents' house, my old childhood room. And Sierra and Tewabe were actually one of our first guests. To be honest, their story is one of my favorite stories. I just can't wait to follow up with Sierra today. She's in Colorado, and I am sure you have a lot to tell. So again, can't wait to catch up with you. Before we start, as mentioned, we had you as podcast guests already. Definitely give their story a listen as well. But again, before we start, just go ahead, introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Where you're from? And also, maybe you could give us a little quick summary on how you actually met and got to know each other.
Yeah, thank you much, Tina. It's great to be back with International Love Story. I also was having a hard time. It's already been 4 years. So much has happened in both of our lives since last time we talked. I'm Sierra. I'm American, and I'm originally from Colorado. Now I'm back to living in Colorado in a different city, but close to my home. My husband is Tewabe, so I'm married to Tewabe, who is an Ethiopian man I met on a research project at the very end of 2017. We both are scientists. We're both working on our PhDs right now, and we have a lot in common, and also a lot is different about us. From our cultural backgrounds, but we just connected very quickly. So a brief summary of how we met. I had an opportunity to go to Ethiopia for a research project, which was an archaeological excavation. And this was back when I was in my undergraduate doing my bachelor's degree in geology. I had this opportunity to go to Ethiopia for 5 weeks with a few other American students, and then we met up with Ethiopian students. We're all master's students working on geology and related disciplines. Tewabe was one of those students. We met up with our group, met up with the group of Ethiopian students, and then we all drove 2 days to this really remote site where we were excavating this archaeological site for about a month. We were living in tents right by this river that flows through the desert. Every day we would wake up, work really hard, get really dirty, digging up the site, and then we would have some time after work to talk and get to know each other. And Tewabe and I just really connected quickly. Even though there was somewhat of a language barrier at that time, his English has improved rapidly since then. At the time, we were mostly talking in simple sentences, but we still completely understood each other. He was really amazing. One of the first things I thought about him was that he was really amazing at making the whole group laugh. I was very impressed. He has this natural ability to be funny, and he was always making me laugh and making the whole group of American students laugh. And so I think that made me want to get to know him more. We sat together, we talked about our backgrounds. He's from the Ethiopian highlands, and I'm from Colorado. So we're both from near mountainous areas. We like being outside and enjoying nature. And then gradually we were like really, really shy to really express feelings for each other because we were surrounded by this group of students and professors. It seemed so intimidating. At least to me, it seemed really intimidating to actually start any sort of relationship in this situation. We're from different places. We're going back to our home soon, and I don't know what all the other people around me will think. So we were really shy about that. We mostly just talked a lot, but he was trying to express his feelings for me through ways that were different than what I would have expected in America. One of the first times I thought he might have feelings for me was when we were having a coffee ceremony at a local school, and a local woman from a different ethnic group than the Ethiopian students who were with us, she came up and started trying to sell a necklace to me. And none of us could speak her language. I was trying to communicate to her that I didn't have money. Tewabe just bought the necklace for me and gave it to me. I was unsure if he was just trying to not hurt the woman's feelings or if he was trying to actually give me a gift. Another time we were walking together, he was holding my hand with his fingers closed, and he said, "This is friendship." Then he switched his grip to the interlacing his fingers with my fingers, and he said, "This is marriage. Which one is good?" I was so confused. I was like, "They're both good. I don't know." But yeah, there were a few little moments like that. Eventually, I had to leave Ethiopia, but we continued talking pretty much every day. We just formed more and more of a connection. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to go back to visit, but luckily I was able to go back several different times. We were able to continue the relationship. I had never considered really doing a long distance relationship before. It was so crazy to me, but we just continued doing it. And he wasn't able to visit me, but I was able to visit him. He came to the US on a fiancé visa. We closed the distance in March 2020. Based on that visa, we had to get married within 90 days from when he arrived in the US. He came to the US right before COVID. We were really lucky that we got to be together right before the world started shutting down. And then we had a legal marriage, which was a little bit different than we expected. We expected that we would go to the courthouse, get married legally, and then soon after that, we'd have a celebration, a ceremony. As it turned out, the courthouse was closed for COVID, so we had to meet with the one courthouse employee who was still working over Zoom and sign the application for the marriage license. She sent us the documents in the mail, and we had a self-uniting marriage, which is allowed in Pennsylvania and certain other states. I had never heard of it before, but essentially we did not have any officiant. We just married ourselves with 2 witnesses present. And it was very strange, but that was the way that we got legally married in May 2020. The last time we talked was just 6 months after that. At the time, Tewabe was still waiting for his work authorization and his permanent residency. And he finally did get the work permit in March 2021. So that was 1 year after he arrived in the US. And then he became a permanent resident in June. And that was after we had an interview in Philadelphia in May. So now he's a permanent resident, which is great. It's still somewhat of an ongoing process because since we had been married for less than 2 years, he received a conditional permanent residency, which is only valid for 2 years. Then after 2 years, in 2023, we had to submit more documents for him to receive a 10-year green card. That process is taking a very long time. We are still waiting. We have not heard anything. But he is still a permanent resident and he is authorized to work and travel. But it is a little bit tricky because he doesn't have the 10-year green card yet. He's encountered a little bit of issues while traveling because of that. But he's doing really well. He is working on his PhD program, and we're both working on PhD programs. He is now in his 3rd year of his PhD at Colorado State University. His PhD is in anthropology, specifically biological anthropology. He's interested in human origins in East Africa. And he has been able to go to Tanzania a few times to do research for his PhD, looking at fossils at this famous archaeological and paleoanthropological site in Tanzania. He's doing really well, even though doing a PhD in a non-native language is something that is so impressive. And anyone who does that, I am just like so impressed by, because already doing a PhD is a huge thing. And so it's definitely like not easy. And especially in courses where there's more reading and writing involved, he has to work more hours than most of his classmates, but he has straight A's and he's done with courses now, actually. So he's finished all the course requirements and he's just working on his research.
It's incredible. I can't believe what happened over the past 4 years, because the last time we spoke, he was waiting for his papers, so for his work permit. And what I think is also amazing is that he moved to the US without ever visiting beforehand. So there's this whole background story of him moving to a country he never visited before, having obviously an idea of how it's going to be there, but living in a country you've never been before and hearing what other people are sharing with you, that those are just oftentimes, at least on most cases, two different things. And then waiting for your papers to arrive, being patient. I remember he did volunteering as well to keep himself busy. He improved his language skills. And I remember that the last time we've talked, he was looking for a PhD already. So the question was, as soon as you get the papers done and everything is in order, where is he going to apply? What's going to be next? I remember the next steps for you were several weddings. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about where you at nowadays when it comes to having a big celebration, bringing family and friends together.
Yeah, we finally did have 2 weddings. We had a wedding in Ethiopia and a wedding in Colorado. It definitely took some time, but we had both weddings last year in 2023. We did the Ethiopian one first in January 2023. That was very special. In addition to COVID and waiting for his papers, there has been a lot of war and instability and security issues in Ethiopia. We were very fortunate to get in when it was safe and have a wedding with his family in rural Ethiopia, and it was just amazing. The only person from my side who came was my mom. That was partially because of this uncertainty around whether it would be safe or not, and also because it's just difficult to get to the place where we were having the wedding because it's pretty far removed from any of the cities in Ethiopia. So, but we made it there, me and Tewabe and my mom. We traveled there. We did a little bit of traveling with my mom before around the country. Then we went to Tewabe's family's home, and they had prepared everything for us. They were so great. Everything was ready. They were cooking huge amounts of food. They were constructing this natural shelter area behind their home that was made out of tree branches and eucalyptus leaves. And it was just this beautiful traditional shelter that is often constructed for weddings. And so many people came, so many people from the local area, especially the first night. It was several days long, this wedding, but especially the first night, there were so many people there. It's very different than a wedding in America. It's a little tricky to describe. In general, it's just a big party. That's the simplest way to describe it. There's a lot of food, a lot of drinks, like homemade alcohol, like honey wine, and a lot of dancing. There's a few ceremonies. Well, I guess the first thing we did is traditionally the bride would be living maybe walking distance away from the groom. The groom and the groomsmen would go over to the bride's house. She would be getting ready there. But then they would do this whole dramatized interaction between the groom and the bride's family. Even though the bride's family knows what's going to happen, the groom and the groomsmen would play like they're coming to get the bride, and the bride's family would say, no, you can't take her. Then they would take her and put her on a horse, and she would ride the horse back with them to the groom's family. And then the celebrations would happen at the groom's family's house. That's how it would traditionally go. For us, it was a little tricky since my family's home is across the ocean. So we just pretended for the sake of this that Tewabe's family's home was my family's home. So I was inside of the home, and my mom was there with me. She didn't really know what was going on, though. Tewabe's mom was there, and his cousin was there, and they were making sure I was all ready. They covered my face with the scarf veil, and him and his groomsmen were coming in from the outside, dancing and singing. They came in, we were dancing in the house, and they took me out, and we all walked together to the traditional shelter outside their house. So that was how it started. Then in the shelter area, there were a bunch of elders sitting around the outside, and they all gave us blessings. One person walked around and collected blessings from all the elders for us, and then we walked around and blessed them. Some of them even gave us like money, like paper money. That was like a blessing. They would gift it to us. And then from there, we just had a lot of celebrations and singing and dancing. Tewabe's mom had made a necklace out of purple string for me. It's called a deity. She gave me this necklace, and that was a surprise for me. So the celebration just went into the night. I had never seen this part of Ethiopian culture before. It was very interesting. And I think it's specifically this region, this southern Gondar region that he's from. They have this tradition where it's kind of an improvisation of heroic chanting. So one person would get up and like do this heroic chant about how heroic the family is, and the other people are all kind of joining in and encouraging the person on. Like, so there was a lot of that. We had a musician, a live musician, who was playing a traditional Ethiopian instrument called the masenko, which just has, it's a string instrument, but it just has one string, and he was able to play like so many different notes. He was playing that instrument and singing songs. He was making up on the spot about us and our love. It continued for a few more days. Most of it was just more celebrations. I guess the one other like ceremony that would be interesting to talk about is there was a naming ceremony. Traditionally, the bride is welcomed into the groom's family's community, and she's given an additional name. It doesn't really replace her own name. She just has like another name now. So the people who knew her before will still call her by her own name, but the people who are only now getting to know her will probably call her by the new name. You go around the whole group of people, and everyone suggests a name for the bride. And then the name that gets the most suggestions is the one that becomes the bride's new name. So we did this, and the name that was given for me, which is now, I guess, my Ethiopian name, at least in this group of people, was Mengenenya, which means one who brings people together, or gathering place. So that was pretty special because this ceremony was including a lot of Tewabe's extended family who had not been together for a while. This wedding is what brought them together, and they were so happy, dancing into the night. Tewabe too was barely sleeping, just partying the whole time with his extended family. That was special. They were so happy about being brought together that they gave me the name Meganenia.
Beautiful.
It was a really unique experience. I'm so happy that it finally worked out. It was very special to be part of that Ethiopian wedding.
How did you feel in general within those days? It sounds like you didn't get a lot of sleep. One thing happened after the other. Were you overwhelmed? Were you able to really soak it all in? How was it once you flew back home to the US? How did you feel overall?
Yeah, there were times when it felt overwhelming, But overall, I think it was overall a very happy experience, and I felt pretty satisfied with it. I was getting a little bit more sleep than Tewabe. I was able to leave the party early when I felt tired. I don't know how he was surviving on just a few hours of sleep every night. We had set up tents to sleep in. So Tewabe and I had our own little tent. When I was exhausted from the day, I would just go back to my tent and sleep. So I didn't feel the pressure to always be part of the party. And sometimes it feels overwhelming just since my Amharic is still not great. And the whole celebration was always happening in Amharic. Sometimes I just really didn't know what was going on. But I still felt very welcomed and very celebrated. And there was always the opportunity for me to be with Tewabe and ask him what was going on. When we flew back, the overall feeling was just like, I'm so happy we were able to do this. Tewabe was so happy we did it. His family was so happy. It was overall not a ton of work for me to plan. It was more Tewabe was planning it with his family, and then I was doing more of the planning work for the Colorado wedding, for the Ethiopian wedding. I planned some of the travel, but besides that, just being able to see it all come together, I was surprised by some aspects of it. Like I didn't know we would have the live musician, and then he showed up, and that was like one of the best parts of the celebration for me, just being able to kind of sit back and let it happen and just soak it all in. It worked out, and it was really beautiful. I think I just felt less pressure because I wasn't the one planning it.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just lovely that his family planned all of this. And I remember the last time we've talked during the recording, you were also sharing how much integrated you feel. You were sharing that you really admire Tewabe's, especially his parents. They're very strong people, strong characters, very welcoming, integrating everyone. You felt in general part of the community, of the neighborhood right away. Your story is so impressive overall. Also listening to you right now, that for me just the best example how you blend cultures overall, that you're able to adapt to new circumstances, but that you're also able to embrace another culture and make it your own as a couple as well. And you're just the best example on how it works out and that it's actually possible. So I'm really wondering, last year you also got married in the US again. You had a celebration, how this went, because American weddings, yes, I guess, and you've mentioned that already, they are quite different to Ethiopian weddings. So how was the day, or how were those days for you planning it, the celebration? But I'm also curious to learn a little bit more about how Tewabe integrated overall in the US and where he's nowadays.
So that wedding was in January, and then we had a wedding in May. And the planning was honestly very stressful, and it was also a very busy year last year. We barely had any time at home. The planning was very stressful, but it all came together. We were able to do a wedding in the mountains in Colorado, which was something that I really wanted. That was the most important thing to me, to be in the mountains. And so we found this beautiful venue in the mountains, and a bunch of my friends and family came. A lot of them had never met Tewabe before, so this is their first time meeting him. And we incorporated a lot of Ethiopian things into the wedding. It was, I think, for a lot of the guests, felt like it was a very Ethiopian-themed wedding. But in terms of the ceremony and how the wedding played out, it was all more traditional American style. For example, I was wearing an Ethiopian dress that I had brought back from Ethiopia, and Tewabe was wearing an Ethiopian shirt and pants that matched my dress. And then the bridesmaids and groomsmen also had Ethiopian clothes. The bridesmaids had dresses that I had brought back from Ethiopia. And then we had Ethiopian food for dinner. We had a mix of both Ethiopian and American music. And we had some Ethiopian decorations. We had a lot of Ethiopian scarves around the place to decorate. We had a somewhat modified Ethiopian coffee ceremony right after the dinner, where the whole Ethiopian coffee ceremony involves everything from roasting the beans, grinding them, making the coffee, serving 3 courses of coffee. And we didn't do all of that, but we did have 2 jebena pots, which is the traditional pot that coffee is made in Ethiopia. So we had 2 jebena pots of coffee, and me and my mom walked around and served coffee to all of our guests in Ethiopian coffee cups. So that was very fun. And so we had all of these things that made it like a pure Ethiopian, all of these little Ethiopian elements to it. But we still had the traditional ceremony. And then we had a lot of dancing with mostly American music, with some Ethiopian music mixed into it. And the ceremony was really special. And I was actually kind of worried that I wouldn't feel the real emotion of it, since we had already been technically legally married for 3 years at this point. We had already had a wedding in Ethiopia, but we hadn't really had this type of ceremony since when we were legally married. It was a self-uniting marriage with no officiant. And then in Ethiopia, it was completely different types of ceremonies. So we had never had the type of ceremony where you have an officiant and exchange vows. Even though I was worried that I wouldn't feel the significance of it, I was very, very emotional and struggling to get through my vows because I was so emotional and definitely feeling how special this moment was. And our officiant did a really great job working with us to incorporate the elements we wanted and to modify the wording in some cases. All of our guests knew that we were already married and we weren't like hiding that fact. We still wanted the whole ceremony, but we didn't want anything to sound fake, like now you are husband and wife. We didn't want something like that in the ceremony because we were already husband and wife. So she modified some of the wording and helped us choose different readings for our friends to do. One of those readings, what made me start to get so emotional, because one of our friends was reading an excerpt from The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I hadn't really thought about the meaning of this reading before because I was so focused on everything else going on with the wedding, but the reading was about the universal language of love. And so this was right before the vows. My friend came up and read this beautiful reading about the universal language of love and souls finding each other. It really hit me how much that applied to our story. So I started feeling very emotional, and then I had to say my vows. It was tough to get through, but I was also really happy that I was feeling the full emotions instead of it feeling pointless since we had already been married for so long.
That's beautiful. I'm so happy you were able to have your celebrations and that you were able to, that was one of the last things you shared with us in the previous podcast we've recorded. Yeah, that you'll take care of the papers so that you hope that the paperwork will be done soon so that the Tewabe can start his PhD or actually start applying, and having several weddings. Both things happened in the short amount of time. So you were able to celebrate your love, friendship, family all together, community. You were able to even travel to Ethiopia again, despite the circumstances at the moment. And Tewabe was able to integrate pretty good so far, right? What's the status quo on that?
Yeah, he really likes Colorado. He loves living here. It's a very sunny place, which is similar to Ethiopia, and he loves the mountains. The seasons, even though the winter gets really cold for him, the winter's really not too extreme here. He has a great group of friends in his PhD program. He works hard. He doesn't spend a lot of time doing fun stuff, but I'm trying to get him out more, go hiking and biking. We love doing that. He definitely still misses Ethiopia, so committed to Ethiopia in his soul. Ethiopian food is his favorite. Ethiopian music is his favorite. All the Ethiopian things are his favorite, more than American food or music. We're able to incorporate that. I've learned how to make injera, I'm very good at making injera now, which is the Ethiopian flatbread. If I make the injera, he makes a bunch of Ethiopian lentils and potatoes, and then we have real Ethiopian food to eat. And yeah, I think he's definitely doing great and like always missing that part of himself that's in Ethiopia, but also adjusting to the US and enjoying being in Colorado.
You were the one making him feel at home, taking care, I guess, of the paperwork as well. At least this is how it went in our case. Like when we were in Germany, I would take care of the papers. Now we're here in Argentina, Nacho's taking care of the paperwork. What would you recommend anyone who is receiving their partner into their home country to support them in anything they need?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's easy to just get really excited for them to come. For me, I had all of these great plans for things that we would do once we were finally together, once he was finally here, he could experience things in America for the first time. And that was all great. I was really happy that we were able to do some of the things on my list in the week after he came, before the pandemic really broke out, because after that we weren't really doing much. So I think it's good to be excited and have all of these plans, and also realizing that it's going to be hard because they're leaving behind so much in their country, leaving behind a really good job and then coming into the US where he was not authorized to work. It was really hard for him, leaving behind all his friends and family. So recognizing that, trying to incorporate aspects of the culture they're leaving behind can be difficult. That was one of the things we struggled with the most, because I wanted to celebrate Ethiopian holidays with him because I knew that was important to him. And we have been doing that as much as we can, but it's never completely the same, because for him, the Ethiopian holiday is when he gets to spend time with his friends and family. Even if we try to spend time with friends and family in the US, it's still a little bit different because he's definitely missing his friends and family back home. So I think it's good to recognize that these challenges exist and that it's great to try to support the person coming from a different country with food and music from their culture, incorporating any traditions and like really respecting their culture. Also realizing that it's still not the same and they're still going to miss things, but we can have new opportunities, new experiences here. For example, this year we went to Rocky Mountain National Park to see the beautiful fall leaves, the beautiful fall colors, and he really enjoyed that. In Ethiopia, the seasons are different because it's close to the equator. There's not the same seasonal changes that we get in the US and especially in Colorado. So that's a new experience that he really enjoyed. So I think, yeah, just trying to incorporate some elements of the old culture and also being excited to show the new experiences that are here and that bring new joys.
If you get so homesick, there's always the opportunity to fly back home, but in your case, it's a little bit more complicated. Is there any advice you can give on how to stay connected with family and friends back home if you don't have the chance to fly over? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's definitely tricky. And he definitely doesn't speak to his family as much as he would like. He has been back to Ethiopia a few more times, mostly in combination with his trips to Tanzania for his research. For the past 2 summers, he's been back to Addis Ababa, but he hasn't been able to go into the place where his parents live due to some security issues. That's definitely hard. And his family is safe, but they're also living in a place, an area of Ethiopia that's not super secure right now and not really safe to travel into. I know he's feeling that struggle. He does talk with his family when he can. He talks with his brothers who are in the capital city more often because they have more access to electricity, so their phones are charged. He's pretty much constantly talking with one of his brothers. So that's great. They're best friends and they are able to keep in touch using modern technology, which is great. And then the reason it's more challenging for him to talk to his mom and dad because they don't have as much access to electricity, so the phone is not always charged, and they don't always have data on the phone. Whenever he can, he tries to call them, but he definitely doesn't talk to them as much as he would like to.
And how does this make you feel overall? If you think back the past 4 years, did you feel like sometimes it was a pressure on you end as well to make sure he's happy? How did you balance this on an emotional level?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a lot of pressure, especially at the beginning, to make sure he was happy, to make sure he was able to adjust, especially when we were pretty much just staying in our apartment during the pandemic and I was the only one there for him. I just tried to really make sure that he was all right. And it was definitely a challenging time. I was finishing up my master's, so I had a lot of work and he was not able to work. So it was hard to keep him occupied all the time. And I definitely was not perfect at doing that. Oftentimes we were just sitting in the apartment and I was working, and he found some things to do. He found some free online classes to take. He started looking into different PhD programs. And then over the summer, he did a volunteer archaeology project where he was working. He was just not getting paid for it. So it was legal since he wasn't authorized to work. He found little things to do. And that was definitely a challenge. I felt the pressure for sure. I had all these like ideas for things we could do. And then once COVID happened, it was a little bit limited because like we couldn't go to the activities with the international group I had found. Now I think he does his own thing more. Like he always goes, and luckily he has this PhD work, and he also as part of the PhD has been able to be the lead instructor for several different university courses. And he really loves teaching. So I'm very proud of him. He's taught both smaller upper level courses and more introductory courses with huge groups of students at Colorado State University.
And in a language that's not his native one.
Yeah.
That's so impressive.
Yeah. He was really worried about that. And then it turned out to be like his favorite thing, kind of. I think like he really loves teaching. That's been really great. He has this job that he's passionate about, even if it is challenging sometimes. PhD is definitely no joke, but he has this work that he's passionate about, and he goes into the office every day and works. And we've actually, I almost feel bad that I've left him so much, but like especially last year, we had so many, because I've traveled a lot for my PhD as well. And so especially last year in 2023, like we were barely at home. I was gone a lot, and he did have to live here by himself for like extended period of time, which was unfortunate. But luckily we're like together for some time now. And I'm glad that even though I was really, really sad to leave him for extended periods of time when I went to different places to do research for my PhD, I definitely don't want to limit myself or stifle my own ambitions for my career. So I'm glad that I've been able to do that, even though it is different. When I was younger, I just wanted to travel all the time. And now that I have Tewabe at home, who I love and I just want to be with all the time, it's not so simple to just want to travel all the time, even though I still love traveling and having adventure. It's always a little bittersweet because I am sad to leave him. But he's done very well, even being by himself for extended periods of time in Colorado.
I mean, that was also your priority while you dated on long distance, that, yeah, you put your career first as well. And I'm happy that you were able to balance that in a way that, and I think you set examples for him as well, so that you're just learning from each other. And I guess each time you come back home after a long period of time, you're just like, wow, this man, like, how did he manage all this? And how did he adapt so fast? And what happened here? How did we even get here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. It's not just me that has been traveling because we both do it. And just last year, I was kind of doing it too much. But he has also had these opportunities to travel to Tanzania over the summer for his PhD. And so we've both had these really cool opportunities that we are able to do, even though it's kind of sad to not be together all the time. But the long distance relationship prepares you for not being together all the time. And we definitely know how to deal with it and talk to each other on the phone when we can, or if we don't have phone service, we know that we'll be waiting after we get back. So yeah, we've been able to balance it even with these extended periods of travel.
So you're thriving as a couple, but also obviously as individuals as well. But
yeah,
I think it's very important. I mean, it's always easy to make yourself depending on someone else, and sometimes it's okay, honestly. I've been there, I've done that. But knowing that you build your own life, your own network, that you have your own group of friends, your profession that you're very passionate about. I mean, that's obviously a big, big part. If you do something you're super unhappy with in a country you probably know, that would have been another picture for you as well, I guess, if you would just have accepted any job and have ended up doing just anything just to work. But I'm happy that you were able to follow your dreams as individuals, but as a couple as well. I think that's very important, as I mentioned. So my last question would be, because I'm planning to do this podcast for several years still, so I'm not going to end anytime soon. And I'm curious to know what your future plans are so that we can sit down in a couple of years again and we follow up and see where you're at.
Yeah, it's a little bit uncertain right now. The first thing we need to do is we need to both finish our PhDs, which will happen within the next couple of years, hopefully less than that for me, and then for Tewabe, about 2 more years. So we'll be still here in Colorado through that time. We'll have some different options about where to go. I know that last time we talked, we were definitely like very set on moving back to Ethiopia. And that's still something that we would like to do at some point, but it might not be right away. There have been so many things going on in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, there's some security issues there right now, and it would be maybe not the best place to live right now. But we'll see what happens in a few years. Things can change so quickly. Whenever we can, we'd like to live there, at least for a little while. But we'll see what happens. We could end up anywhere in the world. We're unsure at this point where we will go. We could definitely go somewhere in the US, maybe somewhere that has a bigger Ethiopian community. We really love living here in Fort Collins in Colorado. But the one problem is that there's no Ethiopian community here. So it would be great to go somewhere like Washington, D.C., or many of the other cities in the US that do have large Ethiopian communities. So that's one option. Or we could potentially end up somewhere in Europe, which is closer to Ethiopia. So it would be a little bit of a shorter flight to get there, and also kind of like in between the US and Ethiopia. Or we could maybe even end up somewhere else in Africa, in Tanzania, since Tewabe has been doing a bunch of work in Tanzania. We see that as also an option. So I guess we'll just see where we can both find good jobs, and hopefully somewhere that has an Ethiopian community, and that's hopefully where we will live. But we kind of are uncertain right now. But we do hope to both continue in doing some sort of science. Tewabe definitely wants to be a professor since he loves teaching and he loves research. So professor is like the perfect thing for him. And for me, I might want to be a professor. I'm kind of open to different options at this point, either a professor or a research scientist, or I don't know, even like a science policy advisor. I'm open to a lot of different options. So we'll just start looking at our career options, and then hopefully something will work out. But yeah, hopefully we can live somewhere that will support like having that Ethiopian community.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, if you don't have the chance anytime soon to live in Ethiopia, at least for a couple of years, yeah, having this network wherever you live would be, I guess, a big, big plus for the both of you. I mean, it's obvious that you love the culture as well and that you miss it. I think it's easy to tell from the way you are talking about it and your eyes just being super sparkly, and especially the way you were sharing your time in Ethiopia during the wedding, and seemed amazing. And I can't wait. Actually, I think I saw a few pictures, and I think you uploaded a video on Instagram a while ago, but I would love to share your experience over the past few years and pictures and videos as well, if it's okay for you. So for everyone who's listening or who's watching right now, that they get an idea of how vibrant and how different it is. And I think it would also be interesting to see the difference between your wedding in Ethiopia as well as the one in the US. And again, I do love that you are mixing cultures and that Tewabe especially was able to adapt quite fast. I think that's very impressive. I actually have one last question before we hang up, and that is, what are you mostly proud about as individual, but also as a couple?
Yeah, let's see. I guess, so as a couple, I'm really just proud of how far we have come. It just would never, this is just my wildest dream, thinking about from when we met in Ethiopia, working on this archaeological site in this remote area. This Ethiopian guy I met there, like thinking that we are still together, we're married, we have this lovely, beautiful life in this beautiful place, and we're both on our way to getting our PhDs. Just thinking about how far we've come. Sometimes I forget, and then I have to look back at it and like remember what it was like at the beginning and how hard it was and how we had this time difference, these so many challenges to even just talk to each other, the language barrier, the phone connectivity, and it just felt impossible at some point. We also knew that there was no other option, that we like needed to be together. We needed to make it work. And just seeing how far we've come is just incredible to me. I usually don't think about it that much, but when I really do take the time to think about it, it makes me really proud, for sure. And as individuals, well, good question. I'm really proud that even through this whole process of forming a life together, which I'm super proud of, I'm also really proud that I have continued to follow my personal academic dreams. And last year, I was able to do work in Greenland, in Antarctica, and in Svalbard, 3 different places with big glaciers. And my PhD is studying big glaciers. So I was very, very excited to go to all of those places. And it was definitely hard work, but they were all incredible experiences. And I think that it was somewhat tempting to not take these opportunities because they would take me away from home for half the year if you combine all of them. But I'm very glad I did that because I know that that was my dream since childhood, to study these big glaciers and what it means and what the changing glaciers mean for the world. So I'm super proud of myself for still doing that. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly what Tewabe is most proud of, but he has a lot to be proud of because his story is so amazing and he's come so far through his life. The fact that he is doing this PhD in a foreign country and in a foreign language and is like really thriving and is really, I think, at least from my perspective, I think he's impressing a lot of people, impressing a lot of professors, and just like really leaving his mark on in the field. And I think that he's going to do great things for really building up the next generation of scientists in Ethiopia. So, but I'm really proud of him for, and I think he would also be really proud of me.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was just the perfect ending. I really appreciate that you took your time to talk to me again, to share a little bit more about your story, about where you're at nowadays, about your future goals. Yeah, I really hope that we'll be able to catch up the next few years. And yeah, I'm curious to see where you will be at once we talk again.
Thank you so much, Tina. It was really great to catch up with you, talk about how things have changed, and also see you living your life in Argentina now. So it's great to catch up with you.
Thank you so much for listening and or for watching to today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, you'll find all the information in the side note as well as in the YouTube video description. If you like what I'm doing, feel free to rate this podcast with 5 stars on wherever you're listening to it. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. I am investing a lot of time and energy in the podcast episodes and in general everything I'm sharing, my experience and our experience and the experiences of other couples. If you would like to share your story, just contact me. I will link a form. Maybe we are going to sit down together and you're going to tell your love story. Have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening. Please take care and bye.